Welcome to the second episode of the video series with our partner Betty Blocks at the Betty Blocks headquarters in Alkmaar. I'm your host, Hadassa Drukac. I'm joined by Marco, my co-host.
Hey.
And we are once again joined by Odin and Chris from Betty Blocks.
Hello.
Hello.
We spoke about low code and no code in the first episode. We discussed what it is and what it means for the legal industry. We won't go into depth into this topic again because we discussed it in the first episode, and watchers at home can of course watch this episode, which is obviously also available to anyone wanting to watch it. This episode we are going to be focusing on the topic of how to approach low code and no code in the legal business. So really digging deeper into how do we actually use this, where does it start, who's involved. We're getting more into the nitty-gritties. So, Odin's excited.
Odin's space.
Exactly. Now, maybe to kick this section of the video series off, Odin, where does it all start? So, can you maybe take us along this development cycle? This is a broad
The
question.
development cycle. Well, getting back to the first episode, the problems. No, so basically, you notice in the different kind of departments, legal or just other kind of businesses, there's something you're struggling with. Maybe it's something like shadow IT. We got all these Excel files, all these CSV files, documents that have this little bit of data, then it gets sent to another colleague, and that colleague changes something about the sheet, and then it gets sent to another colleague, and at some point we have 70 sheets of data that are all with different numbers.
Is that version 1.2.5 A, B, C, and D 2020 or?
I think it's the one before, but I'm not
okay.
sure exactly. Shadow IT. So as an example, you're running into that issue, and you kind of want to build a tool that sort of solves that issue. That's when you start getting into the ideation process of app development. You're starting to think like, hey, this is quite a big problem. Mm-hmm. So I would like to cover this by collecting my data online, and whenever something's changed, we actually update one data sheet instead of multiple data sheets belonging to multiple people. Mm-hmm. You check out, hey, okay, we got an idea, we can probably build a solution. Is it going to be valuable? Well, you can definitely think if a lot of people in your company are running into this issue, it is going to be valuable. From those first couple of steps, you start designing the app idea, you start creating the MVP, the minimum viable product, and from there you dive into the app development process itself. You set up your team consisting of some business developers, some maybe low coders, depending on what you scoped for that MVP. What do you want in that minimum viable product? Yeah. And from there you dive into the actual building. But that's the whole process to get started.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think what you add to that is once you've developed your application, you take it to the market, you get feedback, and you iterate, and you keep improving it. And that's essentially what comes down to innovation, right? It's that ability to build out the solution. You follow the whole process. You've now got a solution, but the solution is never truly 100% finished. Mm-hmm. Things change, so you get that feedback, and you keep iterating on the project.
When I hear the word iteration, my heart becomes way bigger. That's the design thinking methodology. This is what I love about the innovation process, which is it takes back to a point that we discuss a lot at the TLOT Tech together, Hadassa, especially when we're trying to break the boundaries between legal tech, legal ops, legal design, this sort of kind of silos thing. Which at the end of the day, what makes a digital transformation and innovation process successful, or at least increases exponentially the chances of succeed, is to apply actually the design thinking methodologies of iteration. So it will never be perfect, for sure, and definitely not the first attempt. It's going to happen, and that's why we need to create a culture of feedback, iteration, test, and so on and so forth. So thanks so much for raising this. It's so much important for the way we are discussing legal innovation at TLOT Tech.
Yeah.
Well, the wonderful thing is that within development there's already some sort of a built-in iteration factor that that very often is just looked over because it's seen as a normal part of development. So is it actually iteration? It's the wireframing part. The wireframing part of app development is basically you build your first mini sketch of an application with some usable pages, some usable a page is basically like the front end of your app. So when you go to a website, the thing that you land upon is a page. You click on your profile, that is another page. You make some usable pages that you can click along and you already get a general idea. With those pages, with that first build, you can already determine, is this something I want? Mm-hmm. You can gather feedback because you can let people click around. And well, with Betty, that can also be done. You can allow people to build that first little setup without having too much thought about like all the data behind it, all the actions, all the processes behind it. Just build what you see without any functionality. And that's the first iteration. And that already gives you so much feedback. And from there, you build your first, app, your first functioning app. Mm-hmm. And that's very often done in sprints. And sprints basically, also by using that MVP, you determine which items in that app have the most value. You build it, you try and deliver it in a set amount of time, mm-hmm. and then you review it. You have a look. Is it what we expected? Is it okay? And then we go to the next and most important thing, or we iterate and make it better. And that's how you build with the sprint methodology, the agile method. Mm-hmm. You build the app. So piece by piece, sometimes you take a step back, but then you take a bigger step forward.
Yeah, very interesting. And Chris, when we look at the people involved in this process, what should we imagine? Odin already mentioned a couple of names, or a couple of roles really. Can you maybe elaborate a little more?
Yeah, I mean, so the people involved in the process or in the development, in my view, should be at least someone that represents every component, in the sense that you've got the person that's going to be the end user, you've got your kind of no-code developer who can put together the wireframes, put those initial sketches together. Then you move towards having that kind of slightly more experienced developer, mm-hmm. That can then start building a lot of that sort of functionality, additional stuff behind it. And again, you always have IT involved. Yes, it's giving you autonomy from IT, but at the end of the day, IT rule the roost. They are the ones that are making sure that everything is secure, data is being protected, so you can't ignore them from the process. So if you're getting those kind of personas involved in the development, I think that really gives you a complete picture. One of the things that I used to experience myself with traditional software development, I worked at an organization. We needed to build out a new sort of client form for clients to register with the organization. We drafted everything up, wrote a whole brief, passed it over to IT. We got the job back. It was maybe 55% of what we asked for. Had to go back again, came back, maybe it was 80% of what we asked for. There was just this back and forth where they never actually got feedback from us during the process. We weren't allowed to be involved in it because it was above our pay grade in a sense. And it lands up taking like 9 months to get a client registration form together, which is just ridiculous. So having that person that's going to be using it and having these other personas involved in the process really helps you deliver something that's much more accurate to the need in the first instance.
And you believe that the no-code, low-code tooling can contribute to ensuring that these people are involved simultaneously rather than on different...
I think that's maybe where you move slightly more towards low-code. As I mentioned in the first episode, often the no-code tools can be quite limited, and then IT doesn't want to get involved with them. Right. So you can build some basic stuff, but if you're wanting to build solutions that have got a bigger impact, mm-hmm.
you're often going to need some sort of low-code capability, and you're going to need that sort of IT support.
Yeah.
So that's where you've kind of got these two different elements of no-code, low-code, and they each have their place to play. But I think if you're looking to create that ultimate collaboration across all the personas, you're probably looking towards having a tool that is low-code, but also has a lot of that sort of no-code functionality for the more basic wireframing, etc.
Thanks, Chris. Now I'm going to be the bad guy because everyone is so kind to each other. So I'm going to be mean and cruel. Persona is a very important point. I think when we iterate a process, when we work with legal tech tools. So my question to you, Chris first, and then Odin, please, is a very practical question based on your experience. So the culture of feedback, it's everything probably in the persona description. Can you please give us an example, and to the people watching and listening, of a successful example of when feedback works well? And I mean, again, not NDA signed, we're not mentioning anyone, it's just literally more like, can you give us an example of a successful experience when feedback has worked well? And what happens when feedback doesn't work well? What's the potential risk or outcome? So I'm just trying to stress out the importance of, if feedback is done well, there's a higher chance or less chance to have a successful end result. What's your experience, Chris?
Yeah, so the getting feedback, looking for at the sort of the successful side. What we've seen is ultimately, as a result of it, having that continuous feedback loop is allowing you to limit the lack of the waste of resources. Because every time that you don't get that feedback and you steer off in the wrong direction, that's where you're going to land up wasting resources. So that when you have got that effective feedback loop, it really does allow you to deliver solutions in the most cost-effective way possible. And maybe more so, because I have seen probably more of the lack of feedback side, which is an ironic thing, because I find people are always scared of feedback. You know, it's no matter what industry I've worked in, for some reason people are scared of feedback. But I had a conversation with a law firm a couple months ago, and basically they had gone and developed a solution that they'd originally sat down with some partners, everyone that kind of scoped out this whole project, and they went off and built the solution. But they never had any sort of feedback along the way. They got like 1-2 weeks away from completion, and they went to one of the partners who went, oh, but we need this feature. And basically meant that they had to scrap everything they did and rebuild the whole solution. So the solution had at that point taken them 6 months to develop. And you can imagine how much time, etc., everything's been wasted. And that's it. In a lot of cases, it's just because you didn't get the feedback early enough.
So I think if we can squeeze everything in a sentence, feedback, the culture of feedback is important because it's cost efficient, and you have definitely, it's better to spend a bit more time in discussing together what's wrong, what's right, rather than, let's say, it's a better safe than sorry approach, and in the long term works.
But it has to be honest feedback,
of course,
because that's also that's why they say the best feedback is bad feedback. Because True. It's the stuff that's actually authentically telling you, hang on, you're going in the wrong direction, and not stroking your ego and going, oh no, this is amazing, you know, and not giving you that real feedback. So I think that's a very key point, is that it has to be really true, sometimes harsh feedback, and you got to be willing to embrace it, because if you don't embrace it, what you do is you land up developing solutions, you build out the whole thing because you don't want the feedback. You get to the point where, okay, we have to show it to them now. And then you've got this whole wastage that's happened.
Spot on, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. And Odin, from your end, what do you think?
So what the importance of feedback is to me, and I'm really saying this from a product owner perspective, because I've been working on learning paths. I've been working on major products regarding education for Betty. And there's been products that, initially got the potential, or I got a lot of support. And then, I don't even want to say that we got any feedback, but in the end, it just turned out that it was a total waste of money. For example, certain learning paths, certain things that I was like, sure, we're going to work on this, we're going to work on that. Wonderful. But there's also been learning paths, one of the Betty Wolf's learning paths that I've been working on. I've had 4 iterations of one learning path already. Let's say that I redevelop it every year. And with that feedback from the users, it's getting better and better. People get to understand it. People tell them what they like, what they don't like. And purely because of the whole iteration and feedback loop that we've set up, it's turning out better and better and more. Well, how do you say it? Yeah, more like the thing I'm looking for, the perfect.
Yeah, so you're getting more success with it.
Exactly, more successful.
Can we say a lekker experience?
A lekker, very lekker.
Experience. Well, it also comes down to the question, what is good feedback, right? You were already mentioning, Chris, that honest and true feedback is what is important here. Besides also the fact that you need feedback in the first place. But I think it's sometimes very difficult to actually, you mentioned a fear of feedback. It's very difficult sometimes to actually come up with really good feedback, useful feedback. Maybe to redirect the question again to you, Odin, what feedback is valuable? Can you maybe just give an example of what does it actually mean to an organization that is looking for feedback? What feedback would be useful to actually receive?
The feedback that I personally really like is generally like, hey, I exactly like the negative, or not really the negative feedback, but I just want to hear, do you like it? Do you think it can be easier? And if people think it can be easier, that they also sort of tell them, to just blatantly say like, I think this can be easier because of this and that. I don't need no numbers. I just want, if I hear it often enough that something can be easier because of some area, some specific reason, some fake reason, I can look into that. I can dig my way into the feedback that we've gotten, and iterate on it.
Yeah.
It's something about the Dutch culture, is it's very sort of straightforward,
Direct.
very black and white, very direct, and that's kind of how you want your feedback to be too. But also, I mean, if you go going back to the sort of the personas and everyone that's involved in the whole development process, is each person is going to have a different perspective, a different opinion, and it's having that sort of broad spectrum of feedback. So having not just one person that's giving you feedback the whole time, but it's broad spectrum from these different backgrounds, it makes it a lot more valuable. Instead of going to one sort of kind of persona that almost no matter what you show them, they say, oh yeah, this looks good. And then if you show it to someone else, they're going to go, this could be better. Yeah. So it's having that broad spectrum of people that are giving you feedback and not just one sort of single source. And that's actually something that I've seen happen within law firms, where they'll have like a certain group of people that they go to every time for the feedback. And what happens is they're just getting one type of feedback, and more often than not are just getting told what they want to hear.
Mm-hmm. It's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because you've mentioned several personas that may be useful in this process. You should be involved in the process of developing a solution. We haven't spoken about the legal professionals. So really legal professionals with a knowledge of legal issues. What role do they play in this process? We've spoken about mainly developers. I think that's like one of the roles that have obviously specifically come to the fore, IT.
From my point of view, the role for a legal professional to get into the development team, to get into low coding, no coding, is they start off most often as what we call a citizen developer. Mm-hmm. Basically, you have the low coders, let's say the guys and girls with higher programming knowledge. They set up half predefined apps for you, but they lack the business knowledge to properly configure the app to your liking. They don't know the business problems as the legal developers, as the legal people do. So you start off as a citizen developer. You get this sort of a template of an application, and you configure it to your liking. Mm-hmm. And if at some point you feel like you're tech savvy enough, you've learned enough about the platform, you can also deal with the steps in between the citizen developer and the low coder, because as Chris mentioned earlier today, security and reliability, etc., is so important in app development. You need to learn those steps to make sure that your apps are all set up according to application development standards. And that's when you go to the business technologist. That's the mid role we handle. And the business technologists build apps with the low-code platform without touching any code, but uses it to its fullest potential. It uses all sides of the platform, from data, setting up your data model, meaning that's the place where basically the data that is stored in your app is configured and saved, and the front end. So at some point you can grow into those different kind of roles, and that's, I see the legal teams be either a citizen developer or a business technologist.
And maybe to put a slightly different angle on it, the legal professionals are key knowledge holders, right? They understand the processes, they understand the mindset of a legal professional or of a lawyer. So they're key knowledge holders, and it's one of those things when you see in the market, especially in the legal market, is often a case when it comes to technology that lawyers buy from lawyers. And it's because it's such an intricate space that you really need in-depth knowledge of how it works. So the legal professionals can fill in any of these kind of roles and become the sort of low-code developer, but it really does start with them having a direct knowledge of how the legal profession works. Mm-hmm. And that's why they are so important to have involved in your development process. And you do get a lot of cases where you've seen people, they've come really from the sort of the legal background, and they get really into tech, and then they start finding sort of alternate career paths, and they start sometimes jumping the fence and landing up on the tech side. And it's that ability to what you call it now, to bring really direct industry knowledge into the process and be able to convey the solutions that you build back to who ultimately are going to be your end users.
And I love how we really moved from the basics, so low code, no code, to better understanding what this means in practice, who is necessary, and also what the process is. We're not done with the episodes yet. We have a couple more coming. Next one focusing more on use cases, digging even deeper into the practicalities of implementing low code, no code. We're excited to continue the discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.